Greetings, this is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I have drifted into the Underworld. The Star Wars Underworld. I have a bad feeling about this.
Here we go. We must go to the lower levels. The Underworld.
You've taken your first step into a larger world.
You're after something.
Ben.
Since I've started the Underworld, I've met so many great friends.
Chris.
I grew up in the 1990s, and mall packaging is nostalgic for me.
Dominic.
What I love most about Star Wars is that it's fun and it's all-round good times.
So, this is where the fun begins.
May the Force be with us.
This thing really moves!
Woo! I like this!
I can't believe you came all this way to see me.
Why am I not in the intro? I gotta come up with a snappy line.
Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the Star Wars Underworld podcast, your weekly source for all the latest breaking Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. And this week, it's the series finale of Andor. That's right, we're talking about the last 3 episodes of Season 2 and of the series in general. Episode 10, Make It Stop. Episode 11, Who Else Knows? Episode 12, Jedha, Kyber, Urso. We're going to break these down, talk about how they wrap up the series, and talk about how they lead into Rogue One, a Star Wars story. It is going to be a great time. But first, introductions are in order in case you're new to the show or you've forgotten who we are. That can happen. My name is Dominic Jones, and with me, as always, he's the founder of the Star Wars Underworld, Ben Hart, the Star Wars guy.
How's it going, everybody? Good to be back, and not good to be saying goodbye to one of the best shows ever. I'm just going to throw that out there right off the bat. I think we're all kind of it's very bittersweet. But as I say, we're going to be all talking about this show until we die. So Andor will live on. Andor will live on. We will make sure it lives on. And boy, oh boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Well, Cassian Andor won't live on. He dies. We know that, Ben. That happened.
How'd you bring the mood down?
About 10 years ago.
Jeez.
But there might be. I mean, the thing about the ending is there might be another Andor.
There is another.
There we go.
Indeed.
All right, we're gonna have a great conversation about that. Not to worry. Also with us, as always, from the Raeside, it's Hannah Raeside.
G'day there. Great to be back. The voice is at 90% capacity and firing power. So. Feeling better and very keen to get into this discussion of these episodes and just really what it means and, the impact that this show has had on Star Wars media. It's going to be a great time. Cannot wait.
Yeah. Much like the Death Star itself, your voice is days away from being fully
days away.
operational.
Yes, very close. I just need more calcite and calcite alternatives. That's what I need.
Or maybe some synthetic calcite.
Synthetic calcite. One of them.
Yeah. Chris may join us hopefully later in the show. We'll see. Maybe we'll report in from the back of another moving vehicle, or we'll see what happens. Before we dive into everything, let's just the first viewing of a Star Wars in general is special, but when it's a finale like this, just what was your feeling when the final end credit rolled on episode 12? Hannah, why don't you start us off?
Yeah. Well, I do the very lame influencer thing now of recording my reactions, and I don't even watch reactions myself, but I find it interesting, and I'm actually very thankful for this show that I have recorded my reactions, because I can really look back and be like, have this weird third person perspective of like, wow, that's how I felt, and that's how I was like feeling in that moment. The first thing I said was like, I just cannot believe that this is the last that we get of these characters. Really all of them until unless they come back in the future, which we can discuss about. But yeah, I think it was just, I immediately started reeling that this sort of story. Sorry, I'm so distracted. I don't know if you can see in my background for the video viewers. I have this one light in this corner here. I keep setting it to a color and it keeps flashing. I don't know what's going on there.
I was going to say, it looks like Lita Mothma's wedding is happening in the corner of your screen.
I need
there.
the Nemo soundtrack playing. Anyway, I'll sort that out in a minute. But yeah, the first thing I said was, I just cannot believe that this is it for these characters. Because I just felt like we're really into the stride of the show in the second season. And I really think that these sorts of shows, and for the other Star Wars shows, I'm like, make it multiple seasons. That's that's where you get the strength of it. Clone Wars isn't fantastic because of season 1. It's fantastic because of all the stories we get across the 7 seasons. So yeah, I just super melancholy that it is ended. There's my feel. Ben, you talk while I fix this light.
Yeah, so I think my first reaction was just a reaction to the last shot, which is, wow, they did that thing. They did that thing that I heard people jokingly say, what if they did this thing at the end of Andor? And they did it. We'll get to it later. But just overall, like, yeah, I think I'm in Hannah's camp. Like, it is. I mean, these episodes are satisfying. I really did enjoy them. Spoiler alert. But also just it is bittersweet. And I think another spoiler for my thoughts here is just like my only criticism is that I wanted more. I think that's maybe the best criticism you can have of this. And I just have a lot of questions about the show. I have a lot of questions about what's going on. I think there's things, and I'm very much looking forward to doing a rewatch because I think these shows are always like, I did season 1 rewatch, and that was enlightening because there were so many things I didn't catch the first time or the first 5 times I watched the episodes. Now going back to this and being like, okay, this is getting the full experience again and getting back into it because they're so deep. So I think, yes, it sucks that it's over, but also I think there's so much to get into, there's so much to discuss, and there's so much to think about with these shows. I think this is it's very deep, and I'm glad that it ended on its own terms. I've said it before, I'll say it again. The only thing worse than a show that doesn't get enough seasons is a show that gets too many seasons, that wears out its welcome. And not that I say that I don't think there's any chance of Andor doing that, just the caliber of talent that was behind it. But, I'm glad that Andor got to do its own thing and the creators got to tell the story that they wanted to tell. And that's ultimately what you want any creator to have, is just to be able to do things on their own terms and finish it in a place that makes sense. And I think Andor did that.
Yeah. For me, I was surprised at how hopeful I felt at the end of the episode, at the end of the last episode. Not that this show has been, hasn't been hopeful. It hasn't. Most arcs end with at least some level of hope, but knowing that this was going to lead into Rogue One, and knowing the story of Rogue One, and knowing where it ends up for Cassian, it was hard to imagine an ending where it wasn't at least a little bittersweet. And it was. But unlike Rogue One, most of the characters lived, which was such a pleasant and nice surprise that I came away from the show feeling even more hopeful than I was expecting. I was expecting that to feel some level of hope, but I was also expecting to feel like, all these people had to die. What a sacrifice. Instead, it was just like, oh yeah, it is going to be okay. We do know that. We do know that eventually it's going to be okay. And it's because of, the stories that we just witnessed. So I was surprised by the ending in that regard, even though we knew what the ending was going to be, and we've known what the ending is going to be for 3 years now, ever since Tony Gilroy got on stage at Celebration Anaheim and said, guess what? The last scene of Andor is going to lead right into Rogue One. And I was like, wow, Tony, settle down, buddy. You don't need to say that here. But it was a pleasant way for the show to end. And we will dissect the full 3 episodes in just a moment. First, though, I want to remind you of a couple of things. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, subscribe on Spotify, subscribe wherever you can to never miss an episode. If you're listening live and you want to make sure we see your comment, you want to make sure we get to your comment, you can super chat with us during the live show. And if you want to support the show financially between shows or during the live show, you can become a channel member. If you are listening or watching on a platform that allows you to leave a review, do so. We especially appreciate the 5-star ones. And if you want to keep the discussion going between episodes, join the Star Wars Underworld Network Discord. Ben and Joel are always cooking up interesting things over there. And to be kept up to date on all the latest Star Wars news and more, follow us on social media at the SWU. That's the handle pretty much everywhere. You may need to throw some dots and some BSKYs and whatnot in there as well. And of course, check out the other programming we've got on the Star Wars Underworld Network, like Ion Cannon, The Raeside, Tales from Beyond the Galaxy, Tractor Beam, and more. All right, let's dive into things. We've talked about our emotional reactions to these episodes. Let's talk about the meat of the episodes, the content, the story. Like I said off the top, we're talking about season 2, episode 10, Make It Stop. Season 2, episode 11, Who Else Knows? Season 2, episode 12, Jedha Kyber Urso. All 3 written by Tom Bissell and directed by Alonso Ruiz Palacios. I hope I said that right. I'm sure I will hear if I didn't. We will go around the table one more time and give our overall reaction to the episode. And Ben, one more time for Andor. I'm going to throw it to you first.
Yeah, so going into this, especially after watching last week, like I was wondering to myself, like how can they possibly top last week? That really felt like the big arc. Like I think this season was really structured differently in retrospect to season 1. I think season 1 was like, build up and then explosion of action, build up. And there was some of that in season 2, but there was also more like each arc, what the climax of each arc was smaller or bigger in scale to the last one. And I feel like Gorman was so huge emotionally, things, and then everything that happened in the Senate. Like, okay, they're like the top rated episodes on IMDb like ever. Like everyone's like saying like, oh, this is the best TV like ever, not in Star Wars ever. How do they top that? I'm not saying they topped it, but this is a worthy successor to this. It didn't, the hype for me didn't go down because I really was locked in. I think they did a great job of continuing that momentum and bringing things into a more emotional resolution for the characters. I was especially locked in by like the fact that we got basically we didn't get that. If these episodes had been released weekly, there would have been discourse all about, well, where's your Andor in this Andor episode? That would have been the first episode because there's no Cassian in that episode. I missed that.
Remember when there was no Boba Fett in the Book of Boba Fett episode?
Who the good time, good time,
classic,
so good. But like I think that's one of the best episodes of the season is that one. And like Tony Gilroy is out going like, oh yeah, we're gonna get more, Luthen backstory. And then like last week, I'm like, well, guess we're not getting that. I guess Tony lied to us. That was not happening. And then boom, we get this episode. And I was just overwhelmed by how magnificent that episode was. And then going into the finale and like my only criticism of like the 3 episodes is like the last half of the last episode had me on edge because the entire time I felt like it was going to go to black. And it's like, I don't know when it's going to end. So I'm just like on edge the entire time going, is this the end? Is this the end? Like, I think it's going to go do better on the replay because like I will, have the ending in check with me. But yeah, other than that, brilliant set of episodes.
I'm used to having that reaction, Ben, with a season finale of like, is this where they're going to cut it off? I want more. Please don't end it here. For whatever reason, I didn't feel that with this one. I've kept feeling like slowly I think it's because Tony told us 2 years ago how it was going to end. I'm like, you got to get to this moment where he leaves. And so until I see him walking dramatically as the music swells and he looks at everybody that he knew, until I get that moment, I'm like, okay, there's still more to come. Hannah, what were your overall thoughts on the trio of episodes that wrapped up the series?
Yeah, similar going into these 3. I had a feeling it might be not slower, but just a different pace to the previous 3 episodes, because the intense heist like thriller element of the last 3, I think it really had to sort of contrast. And I liked how we kind of went lower and hit some deeper notes in this episode, in this arc. Just overall, I feel very concluded on everything across all 3. I too still have the sort of qualm of it finishing at season number 2. I am of the belief, now knowing all of what happened, this definitely could have been a solid 3-season show. I think, a season 2, you really could have just done everything, with Brasso and Biggs and everyone on that first planet, and then the season sort of ends with the Gorman massacre, and then a season 3 could have been, all the stuff with Yavin and Mon and all that kind of stuff. I really think they should have stressed it out for a little more. But for what it is, focusing on these 3, a very conclusive story, lines up beautifully. And yeah, like you said, I was actually quite surprised by how many people from this show did actually live, which is a great thing, and I loved. And I think just cinematically, they just, the ending was really beautiful of just touching base with where everybody is at. But yeah, there's some really, really epic moments in these episodes that, we'll talk about in a moment. But yeah, overall, very good, very, very good.
Yeah, it was a real touching moment when we checked in with Perrin in the middle of his midlife crisis. That was the moment, really.
Right? Oh, don't get me started. I'm ready. Oh my god.
Yeah, I just going back to the characters all living. I think I was expecting Rogue One. I was expecting them all to die, and I was expecting this to be a really dour finale, because we were going to see Vel die, we were going to see Clea die, we were going to see Will die, we were going to see just like everybody that wasn't in Rogue One was going to go down. And I don't think we're in an era anymore where we can sit around and go, well, there might be a sequel show where you could do Bix and Vel and Will and their adventures, and I don't think that's ever going to happen. I think at best, you get a book or a comic that picks up on their adventures. Maybe if you really wish hard enough on a shooting star, maybe one of them could pop up in like a Mandoverse era thing, but that's highly unlikely. But letting them live, it allowed, like I said, allowed the series to end on a hopeful note. But yeah, I think this episode is kind of a handoff. It's where the rebellion goes from being sort of an underground spy espionage movement to being an actual military war. And I think this episode, the extraction of Clea from the safe house and Luthen dying and the destruction of the safe house and the destruction of Luthen's shop, that's like literally the end of this phase of the rebellion. Because what's next? Rogue One and the Battle of Scarif, which is the first real battle in the war between the Rebel Alliance and the Empire. And I think this was a really sort of fitting way to show that last chapter. And Andor has always been kind of it was a spy thriller. That's how they originally pitched it to us. And that's more or less what it was. And so it just felt right to go out on kind of the ultimate spy extraction mission of getting the person who has the first little bit of info about the Death Star out of there so they can begin to prepare for it. I was a little bit surprised that, they quite literally don't find out about the Death Star until like the day before Rogue One. I always had the impression in Rogue One that this was something they'd been working on for a while, which I guess Luthen and Clea had been, but the Yavin people, which how great was it to see all of them back?
Yeah.
I was not,
even Apparatus, like so good.
I wasn't expecting to see those 2 annoying senators back, but when they walk into the meeting room and they're there, I was ready to cheer. I was like, oh, this is great. This is cool. And that one rebel tech with the mustache, the one I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, you're back. This is great.
I cheer too.
Right at the end with that rebel that has that really big mouth, the alien, and he's on Scarif. He does that roll thing. Yeah.
And he's running. He's running with Melshi. Yeah. It's great to see them sort of bring it all back together. But yeah, a terrific way to end the show. Let's get into the Luthen and Clea backstory. This was kind of their relationship wound up being the story engine for the first episode of this trilogy, and a lot of it came down to the flashbacks where we learn how they started working together, how they built up their operation, and why they were willing to go out the way they did. Hannah, what did you think of the dynamic between Clea and Luthen and the one final look at it that we got in these episodes?
Yeah, I think they presented it really beautifully. I think they very tastefully added these flashbacks in. It wasn't too much, it wasn't too little. It was just a glimpse of back in time of their relationship. And I think it did well to really cement that this dynamic and this duo that we've known of for this, the whole show, it really is more closely a father-daughter relationship. I love that they really emphasized that. And even the short dialogue, are you my dad now, or am I your daughter now? And him saying you are when you need to be. Like, I think it's such a complex relationship because it's seemingly, they're just two people trying to get by in the galaxy and do what they can. And I think it's very professional in the sense that, Luthen doesn't want to get attached, and he doesn't want to make those deep connections. And he kind of, talks about that in season 1. And then Clea is this very, very bruised and rigid character and person who's very, very sort of distant from people. But I really love that in the end we see how much they actually meant to each other, and how much of a deep, deep connection they really had, even though both of these characters, I can never imagine them sharing their feelings about anything ever. The feelings were definitely in there for both of them, I think. So, yeah, I think the flashbacks really added to what we have on screen right now. The scene of Clea and going in to save. Well, I thought she was going in to save Luthen, but to really save the rebellion instead.
Optimistic.
Yeah, right. To save the rebellion to end Luthen's life. So
she wasn't going in to save him. She was going in to euthanize him, or Luthenize him, if you will.
Oh, gosh, me. Wow.
That joke was bad. You should feel bad.
Yeah, feel bad. It was good. Beautiful.
Ben, what do you think? What did you think of this part of the episode? Once you've recovered from that brilliant joke.
Yeah, I know.
Really bit of wordplay.
I'm still trying. Bear with me. No, I really love this because I think that's one of the big questions they've been kind of shrouded in mystery of, and they've been such a huge part of the show. And I think they're, like what is their deal? Like I half expected going in this like, oh, are they going to reveal that that she is his biological daughter and stuff like that? Maybe that relationship, and then to get the reveal of no, but yes, that is this weird father-daughter type of relationship that ultimately starts in a very tragic place, and you understand why he's as cold as he is, and why she is is equally as cold as he is, and why both of them are the way they are. They're both fascinating characters, both Stellan and Elizabeth. Just God, the actors. The fact that it's like one of her first, if not her actual first acting role ever, stunning. Like the fact that she came out of the gate and like delivered just heart-wrenching stuff here. And what she's forced to do, and like really showing her stuff in regards to sneaking around the hospital and doing all this kind of stuff, I think their relationship is cemented. I think this is another thing where it's like, oh well, you can watch Rogue One and watch through completely different eyes. I'm gonna go back and watch season 1 and watch it through completely different eyes, knowing what I saw in this episode.
Yeah, you see how they built this operation together. Luthen is an Imperial in those flashbacks, or something close to an Imperial.
He's with some people that are doing bad stuff. That's the gist.
Yeah, and you see the guilt. You see how he reacts to the horrors that he's witnessing, and he knows that he's part of it. And when you think about his speech in season 1, one of the things he says is, I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. And we see here, that's how he knows this. He was a part of something, if not the Empire, something very much like it. He understands where this comes from. And with Clea, they build up this operation where they are very aware of the horrors of the Empire, but they choose to not necessarily feel everything that happens. Cassian sees everything that happens and he reacts. He gets upset. We see that throughout the series. These two don't. They stop themselves from doing it. They know how bad the Empire is, and they're choosing to do something about it, but to be effective, they can't actually let what's happening get to them, or they can't show it. And so you see that all the way through up until Cassian and Melshi show up at the safe house. They're there and they're trying to take Clea out of there. And she can't imagine another version of the rebellion. The only version of the rebellion she knows is this version that Luthen has of, using the tools of my enemy to defeat them. And it's not until that moment that she has with Vel later, where she says, I have friends everywhere. She brings back the code word, and she's meant to sort of realize the rebellion isn't something you do by yourself. None of these things happen because of one person. For as much as they build up everything that Luthen did across these episodes, and Will and Cassian both have speeches where they talk about how important this guy was, and rightfully so. But his operation doesn't work without Bale's operation, doesn't work without what Mon's doing, doesn't work without what Saw is doing, doesn't work without what any of these other rebels, from Vel to Cassian to Anto Krieger. None of this gets to where it is without this full picture. It's an alliance of rebels. It's not one operation. And for these two who have been operating alone, Luthen knows he's going to die, and he accepts that as his fate. But Clea gets to, in the final moments of the episodes, imagine and see another world, see what they were actually fighting for. And, hopefully she gets to live on in it and experience it, and, actually get to see the sunrise that Luthen knew he would never see, and all that stuff. So absolutely loved it. Someone else who's a big factor early on in the episodes, Ben, your doppelganger, Lonnie. What did you think of Lonnie's final? I won't say sacrifice. It was and it wasn't. I think he wasn't ready to pay the ultimate price, but he did get the word out. Jedha, Kyber, Urso, all the important details that he passed on to Luthen. What did you think of this early scene, Ben, between the two of them?
Oh, I was immediately locked in because Lonnie, low key, not ironic here, has been one of my favorite characters of the entire show, and especially in this season. I love his dynamic, and the fact that he gets to go down his history as kind of the first guy to say the word, as they do in the episode, say the words, Death Star, and I like that, he doesn't know what's going on, but he gives the first puzzle piece that they start to put together. And I got gut punch when you see him slumped on the thing. I was like, because you're so you feel for him. He's in this, and he's been this really important rebel spy, probably one of those highly placed rebel spies in the Empire. And he does his job, and he's right there. He's right there to things, and that little glimpse of hope of, oh yeah, we're going to Yavin. Okay, yeah, okay, yes, go to Yavin. Yes, go. No, didn't make it. He was right there. But yeah, such a great character. Robert Ems plays him brilliantly. Just such a standout of the season.
Yeah, he in season 1, right? When he talks to Luthen, he says, I'm at risk, and we understand that kind of intellectually. We know what the ISB is. We know, how dangerous a situation he's put himself in. Over the course of this season, we've seen the risks he actually takes. We see the ways he helps Luthen. We see the times that he winds up in danger. And so it adds to, excuse me, I'm losing my voice here. It adds to his sacrifice in the final moments. And it adds to the tragedy of he doesn't get out. Clea kind of gets the future that he was, I think, imagining for himself. Hannah, what were your? Oh my God, why am I?
I'll take it from you, champion, from one broken voice to another.
Take it away, Anna.
Yes, a complete shock. I mean, he was on my list of people that I thought was probably going to go down in this finale, but I really did not ever cross my mind that it could have been Luthen. Really, just a really punchy scene that I think shows Luthen was such a rogue, pun intended, rogue sort of assistance.
He was a rogue individual, a rogue solitary person, a rogue one, if you will.
Exactly. And I think this perfectly plays into characterizing him. So yeah, rest in peace, Lonnie. I was incredibly shocked to, we see this. I was more focused on the Loth cat, and it wasn't until we really was like in that full shot, I was like, oh, he's dead. He's not sitting there. Oh my God. So yeah, no, absolutely riveting scene. Really well done.
I did love that we got a Loth cat in there. Like Andor's this like intense, gritty show, and so much of the Filoni stuff has this sort of like fun flavor to it that Andor has largely avoided. And then they're like in the last episode, here's a Loth cat, and here it is. We can do that too. We can do that too. Another character who meets kind of an unexpected or interesting end, Dedra Miro. Wow. She gets her triumphant moment in the shop with Luthen, and then it's all downhill from there, all the way to, I guess, probably not Narkina 5 specifically, but basically, she's wearing the prisoner outfit. She's dreaming of one way out, but doesn't seem likely for her. Hannah, what did you think of the way Dedra's story was handled in the last episode and the way it wrapped up?
Yeah, I'm sounding like a broken record. I'm saying the same thing of like, oh, this is such a cool idea. This is so great writing. But it is. It really was. I thought she might have died, but I actually think this is a much better kind of demise for her than just, being killed by someone doing the wrong thing. It's so perfectly poetic is the best way I can say it. And again, this was one of those moments that I was like, thank God I filmed this reaction, because I was just like applauding, being like, no way, this is like the way that she's going to go out. Perfectly poetic, I think, is the best way I can just describe it. Just, all that she worked for. You could do a whole character analysis on this character, and she essentially burns and defeats everything in her life for the Empire, and it's the thing that burns her in the end. So perfect. Love this ending for her.
Yeah, in a way, it kind of reminds us how much her and Cyril were actually the perfect couple. How much they're so alike. They're so dedicated to this singular mission that they've given themselves to track down one person in the rebellion, that it costs them everything. Like when she's getting, when what she did, when Krennic is going over everything she did to find access, I'm like, oh, this is Cyril's behavior. This is exactly what he was doing, trying to find Cassian in the early season. Now she's done exactly that, and maybe her fate was worse than Cyril's. I don't know. Ben, what did you think of how this all went?
Yeah, I think I cheered too. And just seeing and the fact that you didn't have to see anything else but just her in that suit to know exactly that's the power of that Narkina 5 arc coming through all these years later, and just satisfying. And I think I don't know. Denise Goff said something in an interview. I've seen a heck of a lot of Andor interviews because that cast has just been everywhere the past few months. But she kind of laid it down as like what happens when a minion thinks that they know everything and that they want to just steamroll everything and to a point, Dedra's right. Like Dedra figures it out. She knows Axis is a a major player in this. She knows what's going on. She calls, she says the word rebellion before most everybody else. And figures it all out, but it's just too late. And then her devotion, just undying devotion to the Empire, ultimately bites her in the ass in the end. And just it really is satisfying to see her just completely self-destruct. And it's funny watching kind of the last episode and like, oh, where is Dedra? Because I didn't totally buy that she was like getting arrested fully. Because like, oh yeah, she's just gonna get a slap on the wrist. They'll bring her back. Like, no, she's actually crossed the lines, and here it's lying about like, you waited to do this on my day off. Like, you knew what you were doing. Like, that's really, really funny. And yeah, just I think just seeing a villain get their comeuppance and just the emotional roller coaster of watching her in season 1 and going like, hell yeah, girl power, you get them all, the girl in a room full of boys and she's kicking ass and all this kind of stuff. She's figuring it out. And she's like, oh right, she's a fascist, she's a really bad person. And then all the way to now being like, yeah, that's where she belongs.
Yeah, it was so well executed too. I also feel like I'm gonna be a bit of a broken record on this stuff where because you get this first meeting between her and Luthen. She's been chasing him, he's been hiding from her throughout the series. It's been the ultimate game of cat and mouse. And she catches him, she gets him, she's got him, she puts him exactly where she wants him. And he says to her, it's too late. The rebellion is far away from here. Like we were saying, this finale represents a bit of a handoff from the rebellion being something that was run out of Luthen's shop in large part to a full military, to a proper revolution. And he doesn't even give her the satisfaction of arresting her, of arresting him, excuse me, of getting to bring him in for questioning. He doesn't give her any of that. He's always known, like we said, he told Lonnie this last season, he's always known where his story ends. And so he chooses to go out on his terms to stop her from getting access to what he knows, what he has, and to stop her from, frankly, getting to have this victory. And from that moment, what seems like the highest high when she drops the old Star Path unit in front of him, from that moment, it all starts to fall down. It's all downhill from there, right up until she winds up in the Narkina 5 prison. And that's it for her. And we realize every risk, every mistake she made, and how her devotion to this one target that everybody had told her to move on from, how that ultimately leads to the rebellion finding out about the Death Star. And if she had just left it alone, Krennic might have had his way. Krennic might have won. The Death Star maybe gets to Yavin and just kablooms it the way it does Alderaan. But because of this sort of, I don't even know, it's like pathological devotion to being right, to being proven right about this Axis character, it leads to all the mistakes that end up with the Death Star blowing up. Thank you, Luke Skywalker. Director Krennic, her adversary in these episodes. It goes without saying, but I think it needs to be said again. Ben Mendelsohn turning in just another incredible performance. The thing he does where he puts his finger on her head.
So weird, but so great.
It's so weird and but it's so perfectly Krennic, and he's so intimidating and
apparently that was
evil.
improvised too, by the way.
Oh, was it? Oh, amazing.
Oh, that's cool.
Amazing. Now, Krennic in Rogue One at times is a little bit simpering. He's a little, he's always being put down by Tarkin and Vader and everybody. Here we get to see him without those guys around, when he is the most powerful guy in the room, and he relishes it. And Mendelsohn absolutely he just enjoyed eating up the scenery in every single one of those shots. Hannah, since Ben Mendelsohn is one of yours, since he's an Australian, we'll toss it over to you. Your thoughts on Krennic in these apps.
Yeah, again, it comes back to this very slight criticism of I wish this show was just a little longer and we had one more season, because I really think we could have got a whole season of him, being this real imperial kind of just power that we see in Rogue One, and that I am happy he returned in this show, but I just wish we got more of it. It's that kind of there's always a bigger fish thing with these Imperials. I love that, Cyril, he's kind of always under Deirdre, even though they have a relationship. And then, Deirdre thinks she has the power, but then Partagaz is always above her. And then like Mendelsohn, not Mendelsohn, Krennic is the one to kind of really take down and show Partagaz that he's not good enough. And Krennic comes in and tells Deirdre, like there's always someone above you in the Imperial ranks to kind of put you in your place. And Krennic is such a great power of that. And I think it just even adds even in that flow. Like I love that in Rogue One, then it's Vader to put Krennic in his place. It's so interesting and so fascinating. But yeah, Ben's performance in this show was absolutely, it's so good. So Krennic, so evil. It was fantastic. And, just this short interrogation room scene was incredibly well done, incredibly tense, and was fantastic. Yeah. Loved seeing him.
Yeah, everything from like the way she's sitting there in the interrogation room, and it sort of zooms out and you see the outside bit where the people who watch in through the one-way mirror, and you see Krennic walk in and he just turns off the camera. So what he's about to do is not going to be good. He doesn't want it on record, and then he goes in there and just annihilates her, just puts her in her place and throws her away and throws away. He locks her away and throws away the key. Ben, any thoughts on this?
No, Ben Mendelsohn's just a joy to watch on screen like that. Again, literally the only criticism is there wasn't enough of Krennic in this show. There isn't enough of him. I hope, because I don't think I ever assumed he was a sure bet that he would come back for season 2 or any part of the show. So it was really exciting to hear that he was coming back and that he had not just a cameo, but a sizable, sizable scenes in almost all these arcs.
Yeah, he was in 3-4 episodes this season.
He was missing from last week's, but he was in the third. He was in the art scene had one big scene in each arc, I think. And a couple of good scenes in this one. So, and so like more than I thought we'd ever get. And God, I hope there's a way they can bring him back. Just keep bringing him back. Say he's got a twin brother and just do that. That would be fun, because he's got the hand acting down. He's getting more flamboyant. He's just, God, Krennic is a joy. He's still one of my favorite villains of all time.
Remember when Rebels basically did that with the Mandalorian, like the Imperial Mandalorians? They killed one off, and then a season later his brother showed up and was basically the same character.
Gar Saxon and what's his name, Saxon?
Yeah, the Saxon boys. Them two. It really just should have been one character. Anyway, terrific stuff. Before we'll sort of wrap up the Imperial side of things with Partagaz. Yeah. He goes down. He kills himself in the final moments instead of submitting to a sort of final round of questioning. He doesn't want Dedra's fate. But interestingly, before he goes down, he's listening to Nemik's manifesto, which I will say that moment threw me off just a little bit for no reason that is the show's fault. It was because I've watched that Nemec scene so many times in the last 2.5 years. It is one of my favorite moments in season 1. Cassian sitting there in the rain listening to it. And when they put that scene up by itself on YouTube, I don't know how many views it has, but a strong number of them are just me watching it on repeat and watching it many more times on repeat since, let's say, November of last year. And so like when it started, it threw me off because it's like the exact same. It's the same recording, obviously. And I'm like, wait, where's this coming from? Why is this playing off my phone? Is this like happening separate from the episode? And then you realize that Partagaz is listening to it because the rebellion has put this information out there. It's their own, messaging campaign to people to, do the small acts of rebellion because every little bit counts. And to have Partagaz there listening to it as he knows that his life is about to end. And I found myself wondering, like, is this a man who is regretting all of his choices, hearing what Nemec is saying and thinking, what could I have done to have helped in this cause? Because I realize now what I've done is bad. Or is this just him thinking, I just failed. Everything I tried to do, I failed because listen to this. It's so powerful. Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I love the idea in this, this goes back to, the Grand Inquisitor in first seasons of Rebels of like, there's some things more frightening than death. And, the idea of Imperials who are in this system, the Empire operates out of fear, uses fear to their own advantage. But so many of their people are doing stuff out of fear, out of, I gotta do this job or I'm gonna die. And Partagaz is so cocky. I also love that they threw in his first name, Leo Partagaz. That's just excellent Star Wars naming, by the way. I love that Krennic gets to call him by his first name.
Is it though? So many characters on Andor have just had people names, have had real people names. Leo.
Okay.
Isaac, Will.
Luke Skywalker, such an Earth name.
Isaac was Tales of the Underworld. I retract my point. Strike that point from the record, Your Honor. Continue, Ben.
I mean, where there was also Tim with 2 M's, and then the Gormans had Sam with 2 M's. I'll give you some slack here. Give you some slack. You may have a case here. You may have a case. But he's so Partagaz is so cocky, and I love him for it. But what is that? That is the question, though. What is he thinking in that moment? Because you have to have. I don't know. You have to have a second thoughts because that's what I love about kind of like this, as you said, like this kind of hopeful ending and like this very like we are heading in the right direction. And it seems that everything is falling apart for the Empire and everything is really coming together for the rebellion. And you have all these, I think somebody posted somewhere like, oh, wow, they actually lost like Krennic and Tarkin and Partagaz and Dedra all in like a week. The Empire lost all these really important people in like a very short amount of time. Like no wonder things started falling apart. And but I like that idea of just like, you would have second thoughts. Like, I like the idea that he's listening to this going like, these are the people that are winning. These are the people that are coming down. I don't know. I'm very curious, and I don't know. I'm curious what happens next to the ISB. We know, Yularen pops up in Rebels. He's still around. Actually, what happened before this? Actually, so and of course he's on the Death Star when that happened. They also lose Yularen. Yularen dies too. So not a great week for the Empire.
But Taggy survives. We all know Taggy's important.
Exactly.
Turbo in the chat says he stops the audio at "Oppression is the mask of fear," and Partagaz kills himself out of fear of retribution for his failures. Yeah, that's deep. You nailed it there, Turbo. Hannah, any thoughts on Partagaz's exit from the series?
I don't have anything else to say, but it's perfectly poetic. I think that's just the phrase I've got for this whole entire show. Yeah, nothing really to add. Everything what you guys said. Yeah, really, really powerful way to see an Imperial go out like that. He cannot fathom his mistakes and failures.
There you go. So we'll move from the Imperial side to a former Imperial, a reprogrammed Imperial. K2SO, after his debut at the end of last week, gets to finally have a moment in the spotlight. I did love that we are reintroduced to him playing cards with Cassian and Melshi. I thought that was the perfect way to bring this character back in. It gives us a reminder of who he is, that he's, this big, terrifying, hulking droid, but he's also just sort of really pedantic and kind of wants to just sort of argue, but also get along with everybody. And I thought that was sort of the perfect reintroduction for him. They utilized him really, really well, I thought, in the hallway sequence. Tony Gilroy talked a lot in the lead up to this about how difficult K2 is as a character, because he is, so massive, and it was difficult to find ways to use him, and that Tony Gilroy kind of opening up the vault about the previous iterations of the show, saying they didn't work because they involved K2 too much. I think they found the right balance here. Hannah, what did you think of how K2 was handled in these episodes?
Yeah, I thought he was such a great addition and really added some much needed levity, I think, to, we've had some crazy dark and deep episodes, but every scene he was in was just so comically, sarcastically K2, and it really added to just it feeling like Rogue One. But with Tony talking about how massive he is, I sort of love that. I sort of love that his dynamic with the characters is very funny and very light. But it was an epic scene, not only the kind of the hallway scene, essentially, where he goes to kill those Imperials, but even when he's on the landing pad and he goes into the Imperial shuttle and just kills all the Imperials there as well. Like he's a massive droid, and we met him when he was, they were rolling out on Gorman to wipe everyone out. So he is an absolute killing machine, and that is so perfectly juxtaposed with an incredibly funny character. Arguably best moment of the show is when they very chaotically and intensely land back on Yavin, and Draven comes out and says, "Who's with you? Oh, my God, you're back. Oh my God." And K2 steps in and goes, "Hello, I'm here." That is so perfect. I love that scene. I think this is the best scene of the whole show for me. It's awesome.
My favorite was when he wakes up Cassian. And like one of the last scenes of the episode, he wakes him up, he's sort of poking him on the chest, and he says, "I never know how to wake humans up."
Yes.
Which alone is hilarious.
Love it. So true.
And then he follows it up like a line or two later with, "The man you don't like is here," right in front of Bail Organa. So
brilliant.
Really
so good. Ben, your thoughts on K2 in these eps?
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I'm just like, I could have taken a lot more of this, a lot more K2. I forgot how much I missed this character, how much I loved him, and their dynamic, and it fits pretty well with this show, because I think, like, you forget that, like, Rogue One is a very funny movie at times. Like, are you kidding me? I'm blind. Like, there's some straight up, like, if you watch the movie in the theater back in the day, like, there were some big laughs, but it's also a very serious movie. I think Cassian is a very serious character, so it makes sense that a show surrounding him would be very serious. But bringing K2 into this at this point reminds you of just like bringing in that levity that I think is saying, so like just about everything K2 says in this, much like Rogue One, is very memorable and quotable. And just his casual, like, "You're hearing that, right? No, okay. Are you counting how many orders we've broken?" And just it's incredible. And he doesn't like get that much screen time, really. He doesn't get that many lines, but he uses every single one of them. And Alan Tudyk, glad to have you back, buddy.
Yeah. Tony Gilroy, one of the things he said was that they originally had a standalone episode to introduce K2 that would have been kind of like a horror movie episode of a KX droid sort of loose on a ship. And I'm glad they sort of kept that idea alive. Excuse me. Jeez, Louise. I'm glad they kept that idea. I think I'm getting sick again. This is unfortunate. I think they kept that idea alive with having K2 come in and save the day. Like they sort of utilized some of those horror movie tricks, but they reversed it and they had K2 be the hero. They had the monster be the hero, and I kind of like that a lot. But from K2 to Cassian, this is the end of his story. This is where we leave him going into Rogue One as a conclusion to this journey that began back in season 1, episode 1. Ben, what did we think of how he went out?
I mean, it is a surprisingly hopeful ending for him, and I think leaves him in a very, we know where he ends up, but I think, it is, he we know he has this thing, and I do, upon further kind of thinking on it and listening to people talk, like I really like what they did with the Force Healer last week, and like that whole setup, and like, kind of really hammering home that there is this specialness about Cassian, and the fact that, this whole series has been involving so many different characters doing so many different things, and involved the entire Rebel Alliance, but all that has revolved around Cassian in a weird way. Obviously it was planned that way by the writers, but I think they did it remarkably well, to the point where it feels real. It feels like this guy is really, he could easily have been the hero of the Rebel Alliance. Had he not made that ultimate sacrifice along with everyone else in Rogue One, he could have been that guy. He could have been right there next to Luke, Han, and Leia on Endor or Hoth or whatever else. He was that major of a player. But I like the fact that he is still he's just a soldier. He's just a spy. He's just a person that's on the ground. I think that's what this story and Rogue One started. That story showcasing that story of that, just the normal people in this galaxy and how they deal with it and how they become part of this rebellion. And yeah, I'm sad to see. I think going back, I can't remember exactly what I said, but I'm pretty sure coming out of Rogue One, Cassian was one of my favorite characters. And I think that has not stopped since then. I think he's only grown in my roster. He's probably one of my favorite characters overall in Star Wars now because of this show. And yeah, so it sucks. It also sucks that I really love Diego Luna as a person. Like, he's just such a joy to see in interviews like that. I'm going to miss him too.
Yeah. When, I remember when Rogue One, when the promotion was kind of ending, I remember thinking like, man, it's going to suck not to have this cast around because they were so much fun. And at the forefront of that was Diego Luna. So when they announced the show was coming back, it was like, great, we get another go with this, with this show. Now here we are almost 10 years later saying goodbye again. And it's like, oh, again, I'm going to miss this guy. I'm going to miss this character. Hannah, what did you think of Cassian's sort of final act? Before his real final act.
Yeah, true. Hey, the absolute just build up of this character really becoming his own was so well written. It was so, by the end of this show, you feel so connected to what he's gone through. And I really only felt it until I think it was actually the last arc where Luthen and Cassian talk. And Luthen, they were having a conversation about how much Cassian has done. And who does he take orders from? And Luthen's like, you always take orders from me. Ferrix, Aldani, Minarao. And he just like lists all the things that Cassian has done. And I was like, shit, yeah, he has done a lot for the rebellion and Luthen and everything. Yeah. And you feel it in this arc too. He's really he's got a powerful presence. He knows who he is and he knows what he wants to do, and he knows what he needs to do now. So I think it again just makes it all that more emotional going into Rogue One, and his final sacrifice. Because all through this show he's just constantly sacrificing and losing, but in the end he sacrifices his life, but it is the ultimate win for the rebellion. So yeah, incredibly well-rounded and perfectly fits into Rogue One for me.
Yeah. I liked that in these episodes, his sort of last acts are he's still rebelling against the rebellion. He knows they don't want him to do these things, but he knows that they're the right thing to do. He feels he owes it to Luthen, to Clea, that he has to go and do this, even though he knows Draven and Bail and Radis and all the other wonderful members of the Rebel Alliance Council. He knows that they don't want him to do this. They know that they want him to follow orders, stick to protocols, all that sort of stuff. But he has the gut feeling that this is the right thing to do, and that's what his moral core tells him that's what he should do. And then you go into Rogue One, where he's given orders like assassinate Galen Erso, and he ultimately, again, he chooses not to. And it takes that moment in Rogue One, which I think initially I always thought of it as, oh, Cassian must be the guy who follows orders all the time. So this is a big moment for him not to follow orders. But instead it makes it a moment of, yeah, no, this is who this guy is. This is what he believes in. He is not the one who always follows orders. He's the one who goes with what he thinks is right. And in that moment, he knows that, assassinating Galen from that vantage point is not the right thing to do. So he chooses not to do it. So it adds it's a different interpretation on the scene, but it's not a worse one. If anything, it's kind of works better because we know that that's who this guy is. We've seen him do this time and time again. And it makes it all the more powerful, and it makes it, all the more, gives him all the more reason to react the way he does when Jyn says to him, orders when they're wrong. You might as well be a stormtrooper. Like, he hits right back at her because that's never been him. That's never been who he is. She doesn't know him. He's always been the guy who does what he thinks is the right thing, regardless of what the personal cost might be to him. And that goes all the way back to season 1, episode 1, and continues all the way through to his decisions to go to Scarif and beyond. So yeah, really, really well done. Let's spend a little time. We've touched on some of the Rebel characters from Rogue One that show back up in this episode, but let's talk a little bit about the dynamic of the Rebel Alliance on Yavin. This is where I definitely agree that only having 2 seasons hurt the show.
Yeah,
because it works. Here's the thing, it works. I think every individual arc of this show, when you take it as its own thing, works really well. When you string them together, there are a few points where you feel like, I just think we missed a little bit too much. They are doing a very good job of telling us what we missed, but I would have liked to have seen that. I would have liked to have seen more of the dynamics at play between Bail and Mon Mothma and their how they view leading the rebellion. I think last week when Mon gave her speech, the dynamic and relationship between Mon Mothma and Bail Organa really relied on the audience knowing what that relationship was beforehand. You had to know that from the Revenge of the Sith deleted scenes, or the Mask of Fear, or stuff that was implied in Rebels and their one scene together in Rogue One. Like, it was really relying on you to know that, to understand what it was that Bail was doing for her and what she was doing for him. And I think that extended into these episodes where the dynamic, the stuff is good, but I think it would have had more punch if we had spent just a little bit more time with the Yavin rebels, seeing them actually be annoyed with Luthen instead of just being told about it, like seeing it play out. And I also think this applies on the Imperial side too. I think the whole thing with Lonnie getting Dedra's credentials and that sort of thing, and Dedra's like singular focus on finding access. I think just a little bit more time, a little like a couple of scenes in another arc might have just cemented that a little bit. It would have strengthened the season as a whole. The episodes themselves are still damn near perfect, but it would have just tightened up the mortar between the bricks of this season.
Yeah, I think after this season, I am left with some big questions about, and maybe some of this is stuff that I missed. It could have been dialogue, things. Like I said, I've seen all these episodes twice, like all the way through, like all these episodes. Like I really want to go back and watch them all because like there's so much stuff that I missed. But I do have those big questions about like stuff that I kind of expected would be talked about or would be addressed as in regards to who set up Yavin 4, who set up that base. We see before it was set up, then that just kind of hard left turn into, okay, the base is here, everyone's here. That kind of surprised me. The schism between Luthen and the rebellion that kind of came out of nowhere for me. That's only talked about like that. I want to know, like, okay, Luthen, and they talk about it in the show, like how this stuff wouldn't happen without him, but essentially that bridge was burned, and that legs. I think that draws at least for me, kind of an internal question of like, okay, what was this show's responsibility in regards to what it needed to say about the rebellion? This is a show called Andor. It is about Cassian Andor. And I think we came to expect it to have these broad, view of the Rebel Alliance, and not only telling Cassian's story, but telling the rebellion story alongside of it, and having people like Mon Mothma and Luthen almost as co-leads. But at the end of the day, its responsibility was to its main character, and it did that. And I don't doubt that down the line we will get some of this stuff answered, because this is not the last story about the Rebel Alliance we will get. I am disappointed at the moment that we didn't get it in this show, because I think this show has done the best job out of any previous Star Wars production of showcasing the actual story of how the Rebel Alliance came to be. And I think this show could have done a magnificent job. Yes, with 5 seasons, they could have done so much stuff. I don't want to keep harping on this, but it's true. But yeah, I'm kind of in Hannah's camp. Like 3 seasons, like that could have been great. I don't want to be greedy, and I think ultimately what we got is great. We will get more on these subjects in the past. We will get these questions answered. I just prefer it in Andor, not a comic book in 10 years.
Yeah, I don't think you'll have to wait 10 years, Ben. There's the Reign of the Empire trilogy of novels that's being published, the first of which was The Mask of Fear, which came out earlier this year. There'll be another one next year and another one the year after that, and they cover this entire time frame from just after Revenge of the Sith to just before Rogue One. And the main characters in that are Mon Mothma, Saw Gerrera, and Bail Organa. And the first one kind of serves as a bit of a prequel to this storyline in Andor, and that the next 2 will jump forward in the timeline. And I suspect a lot of these things that we're saying would have been nice to see in Andor will get filled in the subsequent books. But yeah, a 3rd season, or something that to just draw out the storyline a little bit longer definitely would have been nice, and it would have, I think, like I said, tightened up just a few things, even though the core story of Cassian's journey, which is ultimately what the show is about, was done to damn near perfection. Hannah, you want to jump in here?
Yeah. I totally agree. I think the Yavin stuff caught me off guard. I think it was last arc as well that we saw it. I'm like, the last thing we knew was these guys were a bunch of people in a shipwreck playing Scissors Paper Rock. And then now we have a fully fledged like arsenal army of X-Wings and hundreds of thousands of people working on this planet. Yeah, would have loved a little bit more connective tissue with those two sort of extremes of Yavin 4. And then, yeah, to this arc, totally agree. I think I would have loved seeing Bale a little bit more and his connective tissue into this kind of situation. And also Mon Mothma, I think also because, yeah, if not, like Mon Mothma's sort of storyline was really always the B plot of this show. Even in season 1, it was like you had all the Cassian Luthen, all the Aldani crew, like that was the A plot, and then you had Mon Mothma as the B plot, and that was pretty much it with this season 2. And I think that's why the previous arc was such a great sort of climax for these characters, because you essentially have what I think are the two main characters, which is Cassian and Mon Mothma, finally meeting and coming together, and that's why that was such a great sort of penultimate story. So I think they should have probably had a little bit more focus on Mon Mothma and her involvement in running Yavin.
I was surprised at how little she was in these. Three
me
episodes.
too.
And
Yeah, me too.
Bale definitely takes on a larger role in these final eps. And you know, when we take the sort of 10,000 foot view of Star Wars and we look at all the different things that we know about this story, and then the different books and comics and shows and movies and all that stuff, and all the things that even some of the things we've just always kind of assumed, right, about Bail Organa's role in the Rebel Alliance because of Princess Leia's role in the Rebel Alliance. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense that Bail would kind of be in charge there. Yeah, that works for me. But Mon's the one we've been following. Mon's the one we're invested in. Mon's the one who, you know, we've been with for, you know, 23 out of 24 of these episodes, or 21, or however many she actually wound up appearing in, but the majority of them. And we've seen her highs and lows. We've seen the sacrifices that she's made. And I did like that, you know, she's the one, her and Draven get a moment of kind of standing up to Bail and saying like, no, we got to trust Cassian on this. We got it, that they ultimately help it get over the finish line. But I was a little bit like, Mon is not only I won't say sidelined, but just she has a smaller role, but she also seemed much more timid and much more out of the way, just in the way Genevieve was sitting. Like her posture was different. And you know, this was a character we saw last week be, you know, her most confident self, the best version of her when she gave that speech. And, you know, personal progress is not linear. You know, you can be very confident one day and not very confident the next. And she's in a new setting. I did like her line to Bail of this makes the Senate seem easy, after talking to Saw Gerrera, which, as many people have pointed out, the great moment where they say, Saw, we know you're on Jeddah, and his response is basically, no, I'm not. Forrest Whitaker continuing to just be incredible as Saw. So that was a little bit surprising. I will say though, I did love that Mon was there having breakfast with all the rebel soldiers. Like she was out there with the people that she's leading. Like that is true leadership. And I do think that is, even if it feels she didn't have quite the role I hoped for in the finale, I do think like that was a really good moment of showing this is the kind of leader this person is, and did feel like it was in keeping with the story arc that we've seen her go on over the course of these episodes. Man, let's just, I know it's I don't want to end. I don't want to wrap this up because keep talking.
I got all night just for the record.
I know, right? Let me add this just sort of about the structure, the season 1 and season 2 structure. I'll start off by saying, like both of you, I would rather have had 5 seasons, would have rather had 3 seasons. But I think there is something to be said for looking at season 1 and season 2 as season 1 is experiencing the Empire and the Rebellion in real time. Season 2 is reading about it in a history book or watching a documentary about it later after the fact. Because in season 1, everything feels so slow. It feels like for as much progress as they make, They don't really make any progress. And you're feeling, the time drag on. And I'm not saying the episodes drag, but you're feeling like, this is like going to be a slog to get for these characters. It's going to be a slog for these characters to get to the point that they need to get to where they, succeed as a rebellion. Season 2 kind of takes us through a highlight reel. And so, when you read about history, when you read about, World War II or whatever, and you read like, oh, wow, 5 years. Boy, a lot of things happen in those 5 years, and they happen really quickly because you're reading about it. And, in the time it takes you to read a book, you've read about the entire 5 years, and the whole thing is played out. For the people living through it, those 5 years were hell. They were slow. They were a slog. It was terrible. And I think that's season 1. Season 1 is living through it, and season 2 is reading about it later. And both are, I'm not saying one is better or worse than the other, but it just kind of gives us that dual perspective on the rebellion and the, the beginnings of the Galactic Civil War. That's my point.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Sticking to it.
Yeah.
The dynamics of the rebellion. We've talked about, that we were sort of missing these things, but this is something that again plays into Rogue One. The rebel leadership is very, very, very cautious. Ben, why?
Well, the better question is why not? I think that because I was also thinking about this yesterday. I think was the whole idea of, because I don't think I personally knew. I know that's been part of lore forever, but like the whole idea of the Gorman massacre and Mon Mothma leaving the Senate because of it and stuff like that. Like, I don't think I knew about it, or maybe that was established at that point when we saw Rogue One for the first time. So like Mon Mothma, her speech going back to the being like, her pitch to Jin is, get Galen Erso and take him to the Senate and have him testify. And I was like, okay, does that work with the Mon Mothma we meet in this show, who knows that if she even speaks one word ill of the Emperor, they're going to arrest her and kill her. And like, how does that work? I'm still working through that question, if I'm being honest, and feel free to, anybody else, if they have an answer to that, feel free to. But like, I think there's a theme. Go ahead.
They're lying to her.
That was my headcanon.
They're lying.
That was my headcanon.
Yeah. It's not even headcanon. It's not even headcanon. Draven says to Cassian, forget what you heard in there.
Mon Mothma is genuine then. I think Mon Mothma is kind of being genuine, whereas Draven's kind of behind her back going like, actually, no, this isn't a distraction.
But we see in these episodes, Draven and Mothma are kind of in league together. Like, they're the ones that go to Bail and are like, no, dude, you got to do this. Like they're lying to Jin. The plan is always to kill Galen Erso. Anyways, that was my read on it.
I mean, that's the best answer I could come up with. But I think my point here is that there is this. I feel like even from Mon Mothma's perspective, there is this still like, we can still make this work. And I think I don't want to get this too real here, but like everyone today, right now in the real world, is like, resistance. We need to resist this and do this and stand up and fight. But no one's actually doing that thing. They're just talking about it online and maybe going out in the street and yelling about it. Where do you draw that line? And no one wants to actually cross that line into, the system is broken, I have to take this extra step to fix this problem and do the extraordinary thing of mounting a revolution, if you will. I think what we see in Rogue One is this like, and by default, Andor, of just like, people still holding on to, well, the system can work. We can claw that power back from Palpatine, and he's just a guy. He's not a Sith Lord or anything. He's just a guy. We'll just impeach him for the 5th time, and it'll work out just fine, right, guys? And like it'll be fine. And I think people that believe in the system and people that are like Luthen, that are like, it's gone, guys. We have to start over. I think Mon Mothma is way closer to that because you see her obviously on Jin's side. When the latter part of Rogue One, willing to send out the fleet with Radis and go help Rogue One. But there are also a bunch of people that are like, we can't do this. We can't go. Like, we can't go to war, even though I'm standing in a hangar full of warships. We can't go to war. We can't do this. We've got to be cautious about this. And that's what I love about Rogue One. It's just like this whole idea of these senators, like, all this, like, if it's war you want, you'll fight alone. I'm like, what are you doing here? You're in a military base. Like, what are we talking about? Like, it's very, it's funny.
So I think if we look at the show, now that we have the show, I think it's safe to say Mon Mothma doesn't believe that it can be fixed through the old means. The other senators that are there certainly are under that impression. But Mon Mothma, I think it's pretty clear, knows that this is where it's coming. This is what it's come to. And that's why she has, that's why she speaks out against Palpatine. That's why she gives that speech in the Senate, is because she knows it doesn't work. So she's going to go out with one last truth bomb and then head off to Yavin to try and lead the next phase of whatever this resistance is. And I think that's also alluded to in Rogue One when her and Bail have their conversations that, despite what the others say, this will lead to war, and on and on and on.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So we've talked about the episode in great depth. There's something that we didn't do last week. We forgot to do last week. And, we're meant to do it every week when there's a Star Wars show on. It's our beloved, favorite, iconic segment. It's time, once again, for the last time for Andor. For Ben's Connection Corner. Connections in the corner with Ben. It's Ben's Connection Corner. Do.
How's it going, everybody?
Ben's Connection Corner is filmed in front of a live studio audience.
Good. It's never not
Yeah,
good.
we
It's amazing. Missed it.
Yeah, I realized it was off my game last week when we got to the end of the show, and I realized, oh my god, there's like 4 things that we usually do that I completely forgot. That I forgot about in the 6 weeks while I was away, and that was one of them. Ben's Connection Corner, it's back. I know you did it earlier in the season, but we missed it last week, and I feel like there has to be just a laundry list of connections in this finale. I think we could probably skip some of the more obvious ones.
Well,
what have you got for us, Ben?
I usually
Ben loves the obvious ones, though. He loves those ones.
Look, I'm not going to bore you.
There
with
was
the
an
obvious
X-wing
ones.
in the shot?
I'm not going to do the whole Leo pointing in the screen on you guys. Like, if you saw it on screen, we all saw it. We all saw the thing. That thing. You think that thing? I saw that thing too. No big deal. Since we did skip it last week, I'll run through my extensive notes for last week, which counted up to 2 things from last week. Even though there's probably more. Like I said, I haven't had a chance to decompress and watch all these episodes all the way through and really dig into them. But one of my favorite drinking games that might get me drunk one of these days is watching any Star Wars production and spotting the David W. Collins vocal cameos. And there is one in the previous episode with I think it was Mon is walking into the Senate, and you can hear one of the news reporters say something about Gorman, and it's clearly David Collins, which is cool. And then and I did not spot this one. This is a listener submitted connection corner. This is a Hughes connection corner. Our good buddy Hugh, he sent in, says that the alarms in the background on Gorman are from the Rogue Squadron video game. It's a really deep cut. Some of the sound effects on Gorman are actually from the Rogue Squadron games, which I think was back in the 90s, early 2000s, way back in the day. So yeah, and he also in this arc spotted some really familiar helmets from Rogue One. So I think it's pretty clear that a lot of the same props and costumes and aliens stuff like that are things. I mean, we got Pow is in this arc too. So that's pretty cool. I love that in this arc, the first episode, the knife that Luthen shows to Dedra and then promptly stabs
Yeah.
himself with is it's called a nautilin bleeder. Nautilin, obviously, the species of Kid Fisto. And I haven't had a chance to look at it, things, but it looks like there's actually a nautilin face on the blade on the handle itself, which is really cool. Another prequel connection. This is more of a question for you all. Is that Naboo? Was that Naboo?
Oh my gosh, yes. Big question. I think it was. It looks like
the lake and
100%.
Come on. Yeah,
100%. No, there's no doubt in my mind.
I mean, I was colored. I kept reading some stuff, and people are saying, "Oh, forgive me, I don't know who said this. Maybe it was several people said like, oh, the finale is going to confirm that Luthen's actually from Naboo, and this is why he's radicalized. He's from the home planet of Sheev Palpatine." I'm like, okay, that's kind of a cool idea. I don't know if they'll go that far, but we did. I think it's fair to say that was Naboo. I'll wait for confirmation, but look, it's got to be.
It looked just like it. Also, if I may throw in a connection where they filmed the people getting shot in the flashback by the stormtroopers, they used like that exact same location for several scenes in Game of Thrones where basically the same thing happens. So if you ever find yourself being brought to those
Game of Thrones scene and that.
If you ever find yourself being brought to those steps in real life, get ready to run because bad things happen there. I was looking at it. I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is where Daenerys murders those people. And then the stormtroopers march in and I'm like, oh, this is too on the nose. Anyways, continue, Ben.
Yeah. And there's so many actors in Star Wars in general and Andor, like Anton Lesser, nonetheless, is actually from Game of Thrones. Really cool.
Anton Greater, more like it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
The hospital that Luthen is taken to, and the final thing is called the Lena So Medical Center, named after the great Old Republic,
High Republic,
Old Republic, High Republic. What's the difference? Low Republic, Schmo Republic. I don't know. I don't know what I said. One of my all-time favorites little bits of trivia, which is something I just recently learned of this. I feel stupid that I didn't catch this. Is the fact that the guy in Rogue One who says over the radio, "Rogue One, there is no Rogue One." That's Tony Gilroy. And he makes a triumphant return in the second episode when they are trying to leave the Yavin 4 atmosphere, and there's a guy that's like, "Return to base, blah, blah, blah." Tony Gilroy is also the voice of that guy. I think he says Yavin Tower. So Tony Gilroy is canonically the voice of the Yavin air traffic control. So there you go. Really cool. And finally, I promise I'm wrapping this up. I promise.
I like these. These are all good ones, Ben. You can keep going. If this is the quality, keep them rolling.
Look, I pulled like 3 of these out of my ass like 5 minutes ago. So I'm making up for lost time. So the ISB pilot in the really cool looking and very new variant of the Lambda shuttle, that we see them go to things, which I think that's brand new. I've never seen that. Is wearing a helmet that is basically the tank trooper helmet that we see. Okay. We first see it in Rogue One, and it's the guy that's driving the tank. And famously, that helmet is in the movie because of George Lucas. Because George Lucas came on set, it was like, "I like that helmet," and Gareth Edwards was like, "Put it in the movie." George said he likes it, and so they basically took that helmet and just took the face off. So now he's just wearing the kind of the outer edges of it, which is pretty cool. I like the whole aesthetic of the ISB marshals, and obviously every Star Wars production has to introduce its own stormtrooper, clone trooper variant. It's a tradition, but I think this one makes sense. It's like, yeah, ISB, they need armor, but also they're too uppity to wear the helmets, because who can see a thing in this helmet? So yeah, I like that a lot. But I believe that's it. I know at least one of you will scream at me in the next 24 hours and say, "You missed this thing." And I'm like, "I'm sorry. I've only seen the episode once. Give me a break."
Well,
did.
not a connection, but I just think a scene that somehow we have not even touched yet is actually the very final shot of the show.
Yeah. Oh no, we
Still
were coming
haven't
back
talked
to.
about.
We were coming
We're
back
coming
to
back
it.
to that.
We're
Okay.
coming back to it.
Okay,
It was
'cause we gotta
gonna
talk about that. Wow.
end on the last
Cool.
last scene.
Nice. Okay.
But that is just the perfect place to wrap up the final Andor edition of Ben's Connection Corner. Connections in the corner with Ben. It's Ben's Connection Corner. Do.
How's it going, everybody?
Ben's Connection Corner is filmed in front of a live studio audience. I'm still deciding if we're going to make Ben do this for Star Wars Visions later this year. That'll be entertaining.
Don't bet on
it. All right. Yes, the final scene as
Cassian Andor Jr.
Well, yeah. After Cassian makes his dramatic walk from his Yavin bedroom to the U-wing, and they fly away, we cut back one more time to the wheat planet. We learn that B2 Emo still alive, thankfully, still alive and living his best life with his new droid best friend, running around having good times. And also there, Bix is alive. And not only is she alive, she's got another human with her, a little tiny baby who will eventually be revealed to be Poe Dameron. No, obviously this is the child of Cassian and Bix. This is the ending. This is our hopeful note to end on. Now, last week the two of you were in somewhat disagreement over how Bix's story was handled in the previous episode. So Hannah, I'll go to you first because obviously you want to talk about this scene, as we all do. What did you think of Bix's sort of epilogue here?
Well, I think first of all, I just this was such a bold move on. I think I think Star Wars, especially the shows, usually you're on the safer side. Hang on. Usually you're on the safer side with kind of reveals like this. And it was kind of theorized, oh, what if they have a baby? What if Bix, is pregnant? I heard that just before the episode. And I was like, that would be cool. Yeah, that'd be great. But they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't do something so bold. So I was absolutely floored with that moment, that reveal. Absolutely beautiful and absolutely heartbreaking. All in the same just realization of, oh my God, they had a baby together. I think, just talking about Bix specifically for a second, I'm still of the belief that I'm happy with the direction of this character. I do hear though that Bix last season was a lot more actioned and involved and stands up for herself and all that kind of thing. My only sort of fact that I'm very okay with how this character ends up is that she has been through a lot, and I think it's not that she's just kind of wimping out. I think she's taking her deserved rest. I think she's taking her deserved time out. And I'm not too sure if, like I've seen this discussed of like, did she know that she was pregnant? Is that why she leaves? Or does she, make that sacrifice and then finds out, she was pregnant and, continues to raise baby, Cassian Jr. I'm not too sure. But yeah, I can kind of hear the argument and, Ben, your argument, I think, obviously from last week, not being as involved, but I'm okay with it because I'm like, she deserves it. It's not like she's just like, I'm bored. She's been through so much. She's been through so much hurt and absolute trauma. I really love that she gets to have a really peaceful life now. I think that's a real rarity for a Star Wars character to just like go live in peace now. So yeah.
She gets the ending that every sacrifice that she has made, that Cassian has made, that every character on this show has made, has been in service of this sort of ending. Of, the fight isn't there, the war isn't there anymore. She gets to live in peace and build a better future with this kid, with this child, with her child, with Cassian's child, and that's ultimately what they're all fighting for. And so in the last moments of the show, knowing what Cassian is going to do and what he's going to sacrifice, this is what he's doing. This is what he's doing it for not even necessarily for Bix and this child that he doesn't know about, but just for everybody to theoretically be able to find their version of that. And yeah, I agree. I thought it was a beautiful, beautiful and bold ending for the show to end on that note. This show that has been so much about action and death and destruction and the worst things happening to people, to end with someone at peace thinking about a hopeful future. Loved it. No notes. Ben, what'd you think?
Yeah, so I mean, for the most part, I think I still stand by my comments from last week about Bix. I wish she could have been more involved with things, even though I understand why. And I like, even though kind of at the end of the day, I feel like I'm gonna watch Rogue One, not about Bix, but about everyone else on Yavin, and being like, okay, where are all these characters in Rogue One? Like, where's because I feel like, you know, Willman has a great relationship with Cassian and Vel, and like, you know, where are these characters during Rogue One? What are they doing? And I like that, like, we had this question with Rebels, and, you know, we see the ghost there. The ghost is on the base, and, you know, we just have this assumption that Captain Rex and Vel and all these characters are just hanging out together somewhere. Like, they're all fighting the good fight thing. They're just off screen. I like that Bix gets a good ending. I do, like, as much as I loved her character and I wanted her to be more involved, I understand why she needed to exit stage right and do this. And I don't know. I haven't really seen many reactions like this online. I felt this reaction might come up of just like kind of almost the eye rolly aspect of, oh, of course, kind of the tropey, she, you know, the character that died has a secret son, you know, that like that whole thing.
Andor has so avoided the tropes that, like, when it does one, I'm like, yeah, okay, earned it.
I think a lesser show, a lesser franchise, a lesser movie, whatever you want to call it, a lesser production, would have done this in a way that was like, wink, nod, this is the next character. We're going to get literally Cassian Andor Jr. in the future. I'm not saying that's not going to happen. I'm saying the creators of the show didn't do it for that reason. That I think this kid showing up is symbolic, it's supposed to be this hopeful note. I think also, and I don't want to get too deep here, but like, I think Cassian is a character that I think represents a lot of different things in real world history. And he also, a lot of the Rogue One crew originally, and a lot of the characters in this show represent a lot of people in the real world that gave up everything to fight the good fight and gave up normal lives and gave up having relationships and even knowing their kids exist because they were so selfless. I think at the end of the day, that's what you're left with things, and that's what you're left with. The legacy of Cassian is not just what he did, but the family he leaves behind. And, you know, I don't know. Will we see this kid again? Will we see Bix again? I would love to, personally. Hell yeah, let's do it. I don't think he's gonna be played by Oscar Isaac. That's not happening, guys. I'm sorry. But you know, it could go a different direction, and I think allowing us to kind of, I think that's when, like, our imaginations are the best storytellers in regards to this. I'm thinking, like, yes, it's really sad thinking of how Bix will react to hearing the news of Cassian. But it's also knowing that she got to live a full life, her son got to live a full life, and Cassian legacy lives on in this kid is really heartwarming.
Remember what the last scene of Mando season 3 was? It was basically the scene with Din and Grogu.
Oh,
yeah.
It
was basically the scene. When you're talking about Ben, a lesser show doing it, I was like, I don't want to be that person that uses Andor to hate on the Mandalorian, because I don't hate the Mandalorian, but you know, this scene felt very, very powerful, whereas other attempts at it in Star Wars have, let's say, not lived up to the same level of execution as this one. Also, the whole like final moments did also evoke the Rebels finale with the sort of montage epilogue kind of feeling to it, in a good way. I think that was well done.
Also, can I ask a question, a genuine question before we okay.
ask away, Ben. Ask away.
When does this episode take place?
Oh, okay. Here we go.
The timeline. When is the timeline?
There is no such thing as BB0.
Okay, no.
BBY0.
Hear me out here. Hear me. Listen to what I'm saying. Then you can roast me. This episode starts with the words 1 BBY or BBY1, whatever you want to say it, which means, correct me if I'm wrong here, that the start of this episode begins 1 year before the Battle of Yavin. The end of this episode.
Incorrect.
Incorrect. Okay, how is that incorrect?
Incorrect. Because just BBY1 doesn't mean January 1st of the year. It means within that calendar year. So it could say BBY1, but that could mean it's November 30th, which is a few days before the Death Star.
It could mean, Ben, December 31st, 2024 is in 2024. 1 day later is January 1st, 2025.
So Rogue One happens on New Year's? What are you talking about?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Well, no. Okay, so if we use we never should have. Okay, can I just say we never should have had this conversation because BBY is a stupid way to do this. But you know what? Actually, Hannah, you take this. I can't.
Yeah. Because the actual event of they're using the Battle of Yavin as the marker. So there's a before and an after. So say, okay, the Battle of Yavin happens in October, and that happens. You know, BBY. What's the timing that they use? Or ABY? Is that yeah?
ABY is after.
They switch to ABY that next year. They don't start it in the middle of October. They start it in the next calendar year, whatever they have in Star Wars. So ABY1 is that next year, even though it's less than a year then from the thing. ABY would start that next year.
I'm pretty sure zero BBY or ABY is a thing in canon, is it not?
It shouldn't be. It shouldn't.
I don't think it is. It shouldn't.
If it is, it shouldn't be because again, just use the New Year's thing. That as far as this calendar, this stupid calendar is concerned, it is everything is before this event and after this event. So this event is 12 o'clock
within
midnight.
The final year.
Yeah, it is 12 o'clock midnight is 0 BBY. So it lasts for the extent of the battle itself. 0, if you want us to call something 0 BBY, it is that one and only event. Everything else before it is 2024, and everything else after it is 2025. It's that's how it works. Anyways, as I said, go back to the very first episode where our episode breakdown of Andor back in 2022, November 2022, or whenever the hell that was, September. I said it was ridiculous to use BBY back then, and I'm going to end our Andor discussion making that same damn point because it is ridiculous to use this system. It should have just, I know people don't like it when it breaks the universe, but it should have just been 1 year before Rogue One.
For the record,
they didn't even need that. They didn't even need that. They could have just kept saying 1 year later. That was good enough. For
the record, looking on Wikipedia, the destruction of Alderaan takes place at 0 BBY. 0 BBY.
That's it.
So at some
that's
point between, I know, Hannah, what you're saying actually makes sense. I think it makes more sense than anything. I can't believe I'm agreeing with Dom here that I was totally fine with this BBY crap up until now. And now I'm like, okay, I see your point. This might actually be really dumb. And it makes no sense.
And also, like, love Wikipedia, terrific resource. It's a fan run. It's not official. I want to, if we can get Matt Martin or Pablo Hidalgo or Leland Chee. Leland Chee is probably the one to ask. Get him on here and say, in your database that is the official Star Wars canon, is there a 0 BBY? I'd like to know. And he'd probably say some variation of what Hannah and I have been saying for the last 10 minutes. Yes, Jeff in the chat with the ultimate comment here. I never thought I'd pop in while the crew is discussing the semantics of 0 BBY and calendar years in Star Wars.
You're watching us lose our mind, Jeff. You're welcome.
We've run out of things to talk about. We've officially run out of things to talk about. All right, let's wind things down here. Let's go around the table one last time. Give final thoughts and scores out of 10 for the final 3 episodes of Andor. Yes, that is the other thing I forgot to do last week, which was get scores from everybody. We just skipped it. To be perfectly honest, maybe we've evolved past scores and we should just give final thoughts. But Hannah, why don't you start us off, because you agreed with me about how BBY works. So why don't you start?
I get more points than you.
Yeah, exactly. Give us your final thoughts on the Andor finale.
Yeah, I think it was such an interesting way to end the show, because it really had the challenge of having to wrap up so many threads so far. I loved seeing Claire and Luthen. I think that was really powerful, and seeing really everything come together on Yavin. I think my criticism still stands that this sort of ending really should have been a lot more spread out. But for what it is, it was a great finale. It's very easy to stuff up finales. It's very easy to make them not satisfying and not full circle. But I really felt that in all ways with this finale. So I'm going to give it a 8.5 out of 10 overall for the 3 episodes.
8.5 out of 10 from Hannah. Ben, over to you. Final thoughts, score out of 10 for the finale.
Yeah, I mean, I like I said, I enjoyed all this. I thought, the season overall has been amazing. I think this was a great end to the season and to the series overall. I think they really, I'm not sure what they could have done better, honestly, other than just give us 18 more seasons to flesh everything out and answer all my questions. Damn it. So I'll take a tenth of a point off for not having as many seasons as I wanted, and also for the confusing BBY stuff. So 9.9 out of 10.
Oh my god, the BBY taking the points away. I'm just gonna give it a 10 out of 10. I thought it was the best finale I could have hoped for this show, which is saying something, because the show has been incredible over the years. I'm sort of removing the episodes and looking at them as a trilogy unto itself, and not thinking about it in its place over the course of the season. As we talked about, I do have some minor issues with the way this whole season played out. Just in a little too much was left up to dialogue, was left up to exposition in between the arcs. And I think, honestly, just like 2 more arcs, and don't even need a whole other season, like another half season would have filled in those gaps in a way that I think would have really worked. But as these episodes stand, they did an amazing job of wrapping up the storylines that were started, of giving us some moments that I really wanted to see. I really wanted to see Cassian and K2 just kind of be friends. I really liked seeing the dynamics of the Rebel Alliance. I liked seeing Bail Organa be kind of the leader of the Rebel Alliance along with Mon Mothma and everybody else. That's something that's always just kind of been alluded to. We don't really get to see it even in Rebels. So I enjoyed all of that, and ending Cassian's story in the way that it did. So it's a 10 out of 10 from me on these episodes. And I mean, again, criticism of the structure, aside, they did the best that they could. They were never going to be able to actually do 5 seasons. Disney would have canceled the show sooner. I don't think they would have. I don't think there was ever a world where they were going to be offered another season because of the realities of making it. And Tony Gilroy's even talked about how they had to maybe shrink some of their plans for this season because of changes in the way they were doing things at Disney. So the fact that we got something this good and this incredible is just a testament to all of the writers, directors, producers, artisans, cast members, everybody that worked on the show. So yeah, 10 out of 10 from me. And with that, we will begin to wrap things up for this week. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We will be back in 7 days' time. And hey, maybe we'll talk about Tales of the Underworld. Wouldn't that be fun? We could do that. We could recap Star Wars Celebration. It would only be over a month after the event itself had wrapped up. Wouldn't that be fun? There's so many things that we can do, and we will do them as we march forward in this post-Andor world, and we hope you will join us for that. Again, make sure you are subscribed on all the various platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, to make sure that you never miss an episode. Hannah, thank you as always for hosting. Plug what's going on the Raeside.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for another great discussion. Yeah, just got some great streams and videos coming out. Yeah, just looking back on Andor and really analyzing what this show gave us, which is going to be really great. And yeah, all sorts of different fun things happening. I'm headed to Melbourne in a few weeks' time. There's an official Lego and Star Wars Run event happening in Melbourne where it's this massive exhibition of these life-size Lego models of ships and characters and everything. So I'm going to be checking that out and so making some content down there as well. So yeah, lots happening still, even though this is our last live action Star Wars for quite a while. So yeah, that's what's going down.
Yeah, the next time we get live action Star Wars will be literally a year from now when Mando Grogu is in theaters. So it's a long way away. But yes, everybody make sure you're following the Raeside. That's the RAE side for all sorts of good stuff like a Lego Star Wars event in Melbourne. Ben, thank you as always. You want to plug anything? Any coalitions of intergalactic peace going on?
Coalitions of peace and intergalactic freedom are forthcoming. Okay, I keep promising this, and I swear there has been talks. Okay, there's been discussions about another episode. Okay, it's gonna happen eventually because there's like a month-old TV show that we need to talk about. And we're already like 3 months behind on episodes. I promise it's still alive. It's coming. But there has been other shows that have been taking my time and my attention. Now that Andor's over, I can actually behave like a normal person, especially on Tuesday nights. I don't have to stay up till 3 a.m. watching Andor. So that's gonna be fun. In the meantime,
why are you staying up till 3 a.m.? The show's dropped at 9.
Because I don't have any other time to watch them, Dom. I have to work the next day and stuff. And yeah, that's just why I hate the release schedule. I can get into it right now, but I'm not going to. I'm not gonna bore you with that.
Tune in next week for that rant.
Yeah, but look, like I said off the top, I don't think we're gonna be stopping to talk about Andor anytime soon. There's so much to break down, and let's just keep talking about it. Let's just keep the discussion going forever because there's just so much in these episodes. But yeah, I'll stop talking now, and I'll say I'll see you guys next week, maybe.
Okay. Be on the lookout for whatever it is that Ben's got going on. And if you want to read more of what I think about things, because that's really what's most important, you can subscribe to my Substack, DominicGJones.substack.com, aka Hoff Off the Press. I've been posting very long reviews of Andor episodes, so give those a read if you want to read more of what I'm thinking about these episodes. And yeah, that's it. So again, join the Discord, keep the conversation going, become a channel member if you want to help us out. Follow us on social media at the SWU to keep up with everything that's going on. And of course, check out the other programming on the Star Wars Underworld Network, like the Raeside, Ion Cannon, Tales from Beyond the Galaxy, the Tractor Beam, and that's it. That's all there is. So that will do it for us. Like we said, we'll be back next week, same time, same place. We hope you'll join us then. But for Ben, for Hannah, for Chris, who wasn't here, and all the other wonderful people at the Star Wars Underworld, my name is Dominic, and may the Force be with you. It's a wrap.